This episode is brought to you by Zencastr. Zencastr is the #1 tool for all podcasters. You can record high-fidelity audio between remote locations and get studio-quality sound. Go to Zencastr.com and use coupon code THATENTERTAINS for 20% off for 3 months or 20% off an annual plan.
Everything is Awesome is part of Courts and Parts, a podcast network featuring pop culture, TV, movie, and geek podcasts. Check out some of our other shows, like TV Ate My Brain, Let's Chat with Revelant Friends, and Podstalgic at courtsandparts.com.
Awesome. Just tell people they're awesome and mean it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Awesome.
Did you have an awesome time? Did you drink awesome shooters and listen to awesome music and then just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness?
Awesome. 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 That was awesome. You guys are awesome. No, you're awesome. No, you are awesome.
Sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome. I am your host, Kev, and this is the show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. I am so happy that you're here this week with me, with my guest, Robert Lundberg. I'm hoping I pronounced that last name right, because I don't think we ever addressed it in the actual show. And this was a great conversation that was hooked up by Melissa from City Bird Publicity. She's hooked us up with some other interviews in the past, and so she's a great person. Robert's a great person. In this episode, you'll hear this is a case of me not even looking at the basic notes that I get correctly. Melissa sends a ton of great details about the person that she's booking for the show, and I use them all post-script. And because I like to go into the interviews fresh, you guys know this, and this was one where, like, even like the most basic thing, I did not look. I added a comma making him a musician, comma, photographer instead of just a photographer of musicians. So apologies to Robert and Melissa for that little blunder. But regardless, what a great conversation with, I believe, our first photographer on here, and he is actually what I really like that he says is that he's an artist, just a creative force, and that speaks to me, and that's almost like a Kevin Smith type mantra. Where he's not a director, he's a storyteller, or he's not a writer, he's a storyteller, and that's how I've always felt. Is I don't feel like I'm a writer, mainly because I guess I don't have anything published, but also like I write, I do podcasting, and I've directed a few little minor things here and there, but to me I've always been a good storyteller. A great storyteller even. I'm strong there. I may not be the best writer, I may not be the best podcaster, I may not be the best wrestler, but I am a damn good storyteller, and I can help tell a story, or I can tell a story all on my own with the best of them. And I look at myself as a creative person like that. So I really connected with Robert that way. And we just had an awesome conversation about photography, and how things have changed with technology over the last, several years growing up with technology, and how photography is actually like this profession that necessarily doesn't get hit hard when it comes to technology. In fact, it's probably even more in demand than anything else. Publication, actually printing, I guess is more what we're looking for here. The printing industry has taken a big hit with the rise of technology, but you're always going to need photos. So this was a great conversation with Robert, and he's a Boston native. We get into a little Philly versus New England Patriots talk, which was unexpected but fun. I'll take every opportunity I can to talk about that Super Bowl, because it was just, not only was it the Eagles' first win, it was just a great Super Bowl, probably one of the best Super Bowls, definitely one of the best games, if not the best game I've seen ever in the game of football. So I'll be back on the other end to wrap things up, but let's kick it over to Kev and Robert and listen to what they have to say here on awesomepodcast.com. Let's start from the beginning. I know you got a couple things going on as far as a musician, slam poet, I think, as I read in the quick notes that I did look at, and I want to say there was one other thing that made my eyebrows raise, and I don't know if it was just that you were you guest on podcasts frequently, or if it was something else. But let's get to the origin point of your art that you do with music and poetry and anything else you want to talk about. Like, where did that all start?
Well, I have to correct you on the musician parts. Okay. I am not a musician. Technically, I shoot a lot of bands in photography as a photographer. So I shoot a lot of bands and do candid moments of musicians and artists as well. So I think that's where like the music ties into my craft. Is I love shooting bands and musicians and artists as well in these really candid moments. But yes, I am a slam poet. It's been a while. And also, for my daytime kind of gig, I'm also a technologist or UX designer as well. So I kind of freelance on that side of things. And so I love just anything creative, but definitely not a professed musician.
Okay, and I probably, if I had read the note correctly, probably would have said I saw the photographer part for your musician, but you know what? If you do poetry and this is coming from someone who has zero talent when it comes to like music and poetry and stuff like that. I'm tone deaf. When I listen to music, it's usually just to have some noise in the background. For me, music is like, I don't get the same message that a lot of folks do. My music is talk radio and podcasts and stuff. That's where I get like those like my feelings and my everything. My heartstrings get pulled from that kind of stuff. But poetry and is like just a sidestep away from being a musician, is it not?
That's actually true. Yeah. I never really thought of that though. It's just poetry came so naturally as a way to express myself, or particularly writing, where I throughout my growing up, I always just constantly read and wrote and mostly journalized things until I moved to the city. Well, I'm initially from Boston area, Boston, Mass, and so I discovered slam poetry and poetry by going to an open mic, and I experienced the first time. It was such a different way of expressing yourself, and you're so vulnerable because you're opening up your, say, soul to strangers right in front of you on a stage, and it was just such a rush, and I got hooked on that, and yeah, you in slam poetry, you are a performer. So it really, there's the only thing that kind of is different is that you're not, your words or your lyrics don't go into a full-fledged song. Mm-hmm. It's just a different dynamic, I guess, on stage comparatively to lead singer or but they go hand in hand, right? Songwriting, poetry, but it's such a great experience of just going out there. Here's my innermost expressions to just a crowd and an audience that you've never met before. It's a great rush.
So when you were growing up in Boston, which I'm from Philly, so I apologize for beating you guys silly in the Super Bowl there.
Oh man, I was in Brooklyn watching the Super Bowl. Oh man, I luckily though I've grown. I have a new love for Philly.
Okay.
Since I've been traveling there often this year, since I moved to
Oh,
New
nice.
York, it's only like an hour and a half away, so
Yeah.
it's like every other weekend I've been going to Philly. I've shot some shows there as well, and I love the people, I love the town. So I had really nothing against, the Eagles winning. It was
Yeah.
just like, that's awesome. It was good. And I'm like, okay, we've had ours.
Yeah.
We were the underdogs in 2001, and then Philly has needed a chance. They're hard nosed guys on the field, so it's like they had a good team. But it was like I couldn't hate it too much. I'm like, yeah. People were talking, but I'm like, good for the it was like good for the Philly because I have a deep appreciation for that city as well. So.
Well, look at that, a sensible Patriots fan right there. It's funny. One of the my favorite things I listened to prior to the Super Bowl was the Fanatic, which is the local sports radio here in Philly. They did like the week of the Super Bowl. They obviously were out there, and they talked to like their sister station from Boston, or wherever, from somewhere out in the New England states there, and like the sense of them not really like appreciating or caring about being in the Super Bowl was like evident to those broadcasters versus like the Philly broadcasters and just like the people of Philly. Like I guess because the Pats have been there so much and they've won 5 or 6 rings in the last decade and a half or whatever it's been, that like it's almost like not appreciated as much as it was for us here in Philly. That was just like the general like the Philly look that I got from what I listened to and just was reading about. And that's nuts to me. Like, and maybe it comes from being part of a town where historically in almost every sport, it's been forever and a day since we won a major championship. Even our last baseball championship is a decade old, so it was, and I don't know, again, I don't know how it is out there or as a Pats fan in 2018 before this past Super Bowl where we didn't know who was going to win. But as a Philadelphian, it was like, there was something in the air. Something was different about this team. And like when we were there years ago with McNabb, it was like, I don't know if we're going to, like, it was like, we're probably not going to win this, but like, I walked into the Super Bowl saying we're going to win this. Like it's our time. And it was, I'll tell you what, not only, and I can say this as just a football fan, not necessarily as an Eagles fan, that was probably the best Super Bowl I've seen in years. It just the game, both sides of the ball, for both teams just played really well. Well, I should say at least the offenses did. Like the defense was for both sides didn't really show up, but this the game in general, and it did come down to the wire. Like that last pass Brady threw, I was standing up in the back. My kids were wondering why I was acting like a fanatic because I cried. I broke down and cried, and I would have done it if Gronk caught the ball. Like I was going to cry for 2 reasons: either we were going to lose or we were going to win, and it was an amazing game. That I feel like, I think a lot of people were able to appreciate, save for maybe hardcore Pats fans. That, I guess was kind of crushing to them, but I think it was because like they just assumed they were going to win.
Well, it's hard to like, as a Pats fan, we're like, we still had 2 minutes left. I'm like, Brady's been there before. Yeah. He's done it again. Like with the Super Bowl with the Falcons. 2 minutes left. Came back and did it again. I'm like, and so as fans, we're privileged enough to experience those types of comebacks time and time again from Brady. But it was like we did have that like, it's going to happen again. We're not, we took that for granted. But prior to like 2001 or the early 2000s, it was like in Boston sports, it was like the Pats were awful, and same with the Sox. Red Sox didn't win until 2004, so it was like our time came in the early 2000s. For both sports teams, particularly when the Red Sox won in 2004. The town went nuts, and
Yeah.
so the first win, I guess, is like the most meaningful for the town, you know. So it's that first win because that team's hungry. The odds are against them, and you push past something. You create something special because that's that first win.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'll tell you what. And we'll end our sports talk on this, but
yeah,
the thing that I want to see the most in a Super Bowl, and that's me being a Philadelphia fan and being someone from Pennsylvania, is I want to see Philly and Pittsburgh go at it in the Super Bowl. I think that would be tremendous because I'm actually a fan of the Steelers as well. They're AFC. They're not in the NFC East, so I feel comfortable saying that I do enjoy watching Pittsburgh play. But if we can't get that, because that's a hard chance to see. I would love to see another rematch this year of Philly and not Pittsburgh, Philly and the Patriots. Just because now we have this little history together where we're 1-1 with each other. You know, we both have we've seen each other in the Super Bowl twice, and we've each won once. And I feel like a third. You know, there's a reason we have tons of trilogies when it comes to movies and stuff. And I think a third meetup between the two teams would be a fun watch, especially if they can play at the level that they played at this past year on both sides, both teams. So if I can't get Pittsburgh and Philly, I obviously I'm hoping Philly goes back to the Super Bowl. I do hope that it's the Pats again. I would like to see that rematch.
Cool. I would agree. Man. And we probably could discuss sports all day, you know?
Yeah. Oh God. And I'm not the biggest sports fan. I'm a big football fan, and I've been out of it for a few years because my kids dominate my Sunday mornings a lot, but like they're getting old enough to want to watch it again. And they got to see how their dad reacts to like playoff football, which has not happened. I want to say since they've been alive. So it's an interesting time for them to see their dad go crazy. And it's obviously it's a lot more fun to watch Philly sports when we're on the upswing of things. So it's an exciting time to be a sports fan. And you're right, I could talk all day about it, but let's move on. The purpose of me bringing up you being from Boston was not just to talk about football, but was also to, so growing up in Boston, what came first, like the love of photography or poetry?
It's a good question. It's kind of like chicken or egg. It's taken me kind of just so many years to evolve into identifying myself as an artist, you know? Growing up, I played a lot of sports and stuff. And, I like on the side, I always had books, I was always reading and, constantly reading in my strength. And like high school was, writing classes and stuff like that. I didn't really come into photography until like taking photography seriously until I made my transfer to Brooklyn in late 2016.
Oh, interesting.
A few guys with some serious camera work, and they lent me a camera, and I just wandered the city shooting, street photography, and I picked it up so naturally, and it's then I met Melissa, and she saw my photos and started pushing me to shoot for bands. I got a break last year where I was just shooting shows for Paste Magazine every other day, and I just kept on expanding, and it's kind of like the universe give me like the sign of where the last few years I've been focused on design, but it was just kind of like pulling teeth for me with design. It didn't come too naturally. But when picking up a camera, I was able to capture these just moments that of life and freeze them and kind of have this observation and take on life using this tool of camera. And I've been going full full bore since late 2016 into 2017, and poetry and writing has always been with me along the way. Though I constantly write every day. I have just a routine on writing, and I always like to mix it up, going to my friends' open mics in the city, and going back to Boston doing some open mics as well. But what the universe has kind of shown me a new path of like photography. But I think as a photographer, you can also be a writer. I think it goes hand in hand. Particularly style where I go for is like a more photojournalist kind of sense of investigative, curious kind of sense of life. Going out in the streets, discovering different nooks and subcultures of our society, and trying to uncover that. It goes along hand in hand with writing. So, that's kind of like a synopsis of kind of my transformation of identifying myself so truly as an artist and a creator. And I don't like to label myself as one thing or another.
Yeah.
I could pick up a pen or a camera and create or express myself in the ways I want to express myself using each unique medium. So I don't like to limit myself just by calling myself one thing. I would just say generalize and say artist, and that's where I feel whole as a person right now, as an artist.
That's a very I'm starting to hear myself. There we go. Okay. It's like a very Kevin Smith type of mentality of, I'm not sure if you're a fan or familiar with Kevin Smith, but like he's always kind of going on about, not necessarily being a director, but a storyteller or a creator. And in probably more recent years, he'll say creator versus storyteller.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, how that's kind of the way I like same path as you, as far as I don't limit myself as a podcaster because I like to write. I don't do it as often as I should or want to. I wish I had the discipline to just pick up a pen every day and write something, and I can. I think that's just me finding excuses not to.
Yeah.
And I think most creators, I think, can always find an excuse not to. It's always just, I envy, guys like you who can push through it and just say, nah, I'm going to do it. Even if it's 10 minutes, let me do it. And that's, I think, an important thing to being a good storyteller or a good creator is pushing through, being able to just do it, whether it's, you're not limiting yourself to one art form. So you are able to say, all right, today I'm going to pick up and write, or pick up my camera and shoot. And I don't know, I'm going to assume just by talking to you, you're probably roughly in the same age range as I am. We'll say millennial, mid to late 20s, early 30s. So you probably, have you grown up in that with the digital art form? Like everything was kind of like, pen and paper back in the day, and now we're living this digital world. Did you grow up like that, or are you much younger than I'm thinking?
No, I'm at the end of the month, I'm turning 33, so
okay,
I'm definitely on the spectrum of the millennial spectrum. So you grew up with transformation. You had dial landlines, and then came the modem of like that the sound of the modem, or when someby called, you get disconnected.
Yep.
So, and then came like the Star Tech phones, and Motorola Star Tech phones, and growing up.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
that was my first. That wasn't my first phone, but that was my first quote unquote high tech phone.
Yeah. And then like I remember like maybe 8th grade, we were like had pagers, like,
yeah.
So yeah, we're I'm definitely on that spectrum of like I grew up with the transformation of technology at a certain pace, but then when it hit the early 2000s, it started picking up, and this past last decade, things have exponentially just took over with the electronic devices and different experiences where now those experiences back, in the 90s, growing up, like VHS tapes are kind of gone. So,
It's I still have I have a couple VHSs. Some are like home movies or like home recordings of when I used to wrestle. We started wrestling in an era where the only way you could film was on either VHS or those tiny like VHC or whatever they were tapes. So I have a ton of those, but I think my proudest VHS or set of VHSs is the original Star Wars trilogy, because I'm 99% sure I would need to find a VCR to verify this, but it's the non-special edition versions of Star Wars I have on VHS.
oh, cool.
And that's like a rarity. I don't think you can find them anywhere.
Yeah.
Even I don't think Disney's even allowed to release the original Star Wars untouched, because I think Fox still has a hand in it somehow.
Yeah.
I guess if Disney ends up buying Fox, if that goes through, then they will be able to. But regardless, like finding a non-special edition version of Star Wars is nearly impossible in 2018. So like that's like my like one day I want to just go find a VCR and just see what these are, because it's like the nerd in me, like the true nerd in me, wants to find out what they are. But yeah, I mean VHS is. It still blows my mind that there's a generation of kids who are probably, maybe only a decade younger than us, that they truly don't know what VHS means. And furthermore, like not much younger than them, they're not going to know what DVDs or Blu-rays are, because everything's digital now.
Right. It's a crazy concept.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of weird to me. Right. And,
Yeah.
well, that's why I've been playing with for going back to like photography. I've been playing with like film too, like 35 millimeter film.
Oh, okay.
I even picked up this like 1938 Super 8 film camera, so I kind of want to start shooting live action film too.
Oh, nice.
So actually, yeah, it's like I kind of have a craving, a longing to go back to. I would say old hat, but I guess old hat. Just older technology where it was more of a craft, particularly when it comes to film, where you actually had to place the film in. You wouldn't be able to look at the image immediately like a digital DSLR.
Yeah.
You just have to know and be that good with your eye to capture the exact shot you want, and then go back and develop it. So it was a completely different craft in photography, comparatively to now with the digital DSLRs, where you can delete, edit, and look at an instant image in the back of your camera immediately. So yeah, I crave just to keep that practice up of learning the old practices, because to keep it alive. And it's more of an art form and craft, I think, being hands-on and learning a craft comparatively to instant images and maybe some digital editing. Then it's out there on the web in the world, wherever the end result may be. So I feel like it's important to keep that knowledge base up, and maybe teach, pass the word to younger generations about why it's important to step away from the digital devices now and then, because you start using different parts of your brain. You have to, critically think about problems when you're working with your hands, comparatively to having a computer solve them, or like Google like a solution or answer, to a question.
Yeah.
It's like you may actually have to use your mind. So
Yeah. And that's what I was leading to, wanting to chat about the digital world and photography. There's a lot of things have been affected by, the modern world going digital, but I got to say, or assume at least, that being a photographer, whether you're doing old school photography with the actual film, or, I'm sure it's a lot easier, with the digital, that is a profession or art form that I gotta assume isn't really affected much, save for maybe the saturation of people saying, "Oh, I could be a photographer now because I can do it on my phone." But like, because whether your photo is published in a magazine or online, for the most part, it's and you can correct me here if I'm talking out of order, but there's still a need for photographers in not just like, family portrait sense, but in a business sense of, we need to be able to show off this band or this red carpet event in our publication, whether it's print or online.
I would agree. Photography may have evolved with technology and different ways of communication methods compared, digital blogs and magazines and comparatively to print. But I would agree with you regarding that photography. There may actually be more need of good photographers and professional photographers now. With, say, corporations always need photographers for event photography, conference photography. You have the VIP events. You have there's so much need for content or creation and good and professional content creation comparatively to people who think they are photographers on their cell phone. There's really a high demand for quality images, even more so now because we're a very visual society at this point due to the web. So we're craving visual language now. So if you can create captivating content regarding whatever, maybe your brand, no matter what you're doing, people will engage in it so much more if you have strong imagery incorporated along with storytelling within your brand, no matter what you're doing. So I think it's even more important to have strong photography whatever you're doing. So I would definitely agree with you on that point.
Yeah, because it just seems like, I would have to imagine that while there's still a need for people to, for authors and for novelists out there to write, the printing companies, they're still obviously printing, but that need is far less with the ebook world. So several industries I think have been changed big time, but photography, I just feel like you said it kind of grew up just like us. It grew up with technology, and there's it's just fascinating that and as someone who does not think of them as a photographer, save for when I'm using my phone. I'm one of those guys. It doesn't cross my mind that like, hey, wow, that industry is, if anything, and you kind of confirmed it, booming.
Yeah, it's like we evolved. In just general life in general, or just in the environment, to survive, you have to adapt and evolve. So, if you have to pick up current technologies as a photographer and evolve with the markets and the business wise and in publications and the digital age, you have to learn that too to stay afloat and evolve and learn new technologies and dive into it. But you can also still, I think there's a demand for like the raw organic look made from like film as well. So there's also a market for that now, since I think we've hit a mass of just digital overload. So I think if you can create just organic stuff using more of older equipment, there's also a market for that too, particularly maybe in the art world. You just create a new, if you blend the two, I think that's where you really have some balance. And I once again, I don't think there should be either or. I think there's just like a place for a need for digital, and then also definitely a place and need for the older methods, which gives you a unique look and feel to, say, shooting with a Super 8 film for like live action, it will give you a totally different look comparatively to shooting with a digital, 4K plus
Yeah.
live action camera. So depends on what you want, what type of story you want to tell, I guess, with the visual imagery.
Now, and I know we started a little late, so I won't keep you too much longer, so that you kind of stay on your time frame here. But you've mentioned live action like 2 or 3 times now. So is looking forward to the future. Is that kind of like where you see yourself going? Like you maybe you want to, whether it's writing and directing or just shooting, is that something you see for yourself in the future, like doing some film work?
I may, yeah. I actually starting to collaborate with a guy, Aaron Emanuel, who was the lead singer of Glass Mannequins. I shot in Brooklyn. He's actually from Somerville, Mass, which is near Boston in the city. And we just recently talking about a documentary project regarding, showcasing maybe mental illness within, say, the freelancer realm of corporate side of things, and like the challenges you face as a freelancer of ups and downs of trying to start your own business and dealing with also your health and mental health issues and the stressors that come along with, doing your own thing. So I think film is definitely on my mind at this moment. So that's why I talk about it so much as well. But I love still imagery as well. So once again, I just want to call myself an artist and a creator. But I just love trying to create captivating stories with different types of mediums.
I do want to, I guess the final thing I want to touch on is what prompted you moving from the Boston area to New York area, because they both are big cities. So it seems like opportunity could be, and again, this is maybe me speaking out of order here, but it seems like opportunity in both areas could be there. So what prompted, like, what was there always a drive to get out of Boston, or is it the classic New York is the place where you go to kind of start out as an artist?
I think it might have been a mixture of both. Like, New York was the city for designers and artists and creators, and for me at least, in the Boston area, I didn't really see too many unique opportunities like I noticed in New York regarding, say, galleries or film or photography. Boston, there's a lot of tech and innovation going on there. And I was involved with startups and tech there and made numerous, great many friends in that realm. But I felt as an individual in my vision, I just had this vision in New York and I had to do it. It was getting late in 2016 and I'm like, I gotta go. I ended a tech contract, and this is a perfect opportunity. Nothing's tying me down. I'm gonna pick up and go. And going to New York, you're exposed to like the world, like at a macro level of seeing all these different cultures, and it's just such a different pace comparatively to Boston, and that's how I kind of found photography too. So it's been an experience, and I think, though, I think if I never left for New York, I would never really have picked up a serious camera or gotten the exposure regarding my work if I stayed in Boston. So I think if you go to New York, I think you have a lot more access to outlets to expose your work to the world on a larger level comparatively to, say, Boston, due to the lack of maybe just institutions that could help you out. So I think that's why artists say New York, because it really is like a energy or it really is just a city that harbors art and those types of organizations that will help you expose yourself on a larger market. So I think starting out, it's a good place just to learn the business of art, or no matter what medium, and then maybe go back to like Boston or a smaller town. It depends on, what your ideals are. But I think New York has given me a lesson in the business of art and regarding exposure and getting your work out there and how demanding it is as well. So.
And really, New York, and this is like the way I feel about Philly. Like the reason I live in the suburbs of Philly. But generally speaking, I can get to Philly in less than an hour. The reason I love this area so much, and I think the really depending on where you want to go or visit and whatnot, the same can be said about New York. Is that there's so much culture and history within probably 2 hours of both Philly and New York. Like I can get to New York, like you said, about an hour and a half on really good traffic, 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer in bad traffic between Philly and New York. And I can get down to the beach, or I can go down to DC. For you, how far is Boston from DC? About 2-3 hours?
Boston to Washington, D.C.?
No, I'm sorry. I meant New York.
I was like, yeah, that's about like 8 hours or 6 hours. New York is about 3.5 hours pending traffic, though. It generally ends up, if you go directly from Boston and directly into the city, you have to add in an hour of traffic going into the city. So it generally ends up being like 5 just due to traffic in the city. But without traffic, light traffic, it's like 3.5 hours.
Yeah, so I mean, realistically, like from New York, you can always go back home to Boston or anywhere between the two cities. I don't know much about beyond New York and Boston that's out there, but I imagine as someone who's traveled between there's got to be some spots that you would want to visit. Like New York just seems like a good spot. To be able to get to different places for day trips or for weekend trips pretty easily. And the same way I feel about Philly, I can get anywhere that I would want to go within 2 hours, worst case scenario, maybe within 5 hours, and still be able to like enjoy the day, spend a long weekend somewhere. And I have to imagine that's gotta be appealing, to moving to New York as well.
Oh, completely, man. I can get upstate. Upstate has some really unique towns, and like Kingston, New York is really unique and creative, like artist community up there too. And same with like Woodstock or Saratoga Springs. I've been kind of like taking trips upstate New York because I never realized how large New York was, the state of New York.
Yeah.
And then I can, like you said, I can go back to Boston, visit my family. And then from Boston, I love Vermont and Maine, like to really just mellow out. And it's really beautiful up there too. Then you can easily get to Canada, Quebec, Montreal, or Toronto, going up New York. You can hit Toronto easily too. So, which I did last summer. So yeah, it's a great hub to go a great deal of places on the East Coast, and it's like been a kind of adventure. So I dig it. I definitely dig it.
It's one of my favorite places I've ever been to is the specifically Niagara Falls, Canada, but like Toronto too. Like there's just something so clean and refreshing about every trip I've ever taken to Canada, which has been over a decade since I've been there. But I used to go for business a few times a year, and it was always my favorite trip. Was being able to go visit Canada, and I mean, and I can only imagine like someone who was just taking pictures with. I don't even know if I had a smartphone capable of taking pictures back then. So it was all kind of with my mind's eye, just the beauty of Canada, and to be a photographer like that would be reason enough for me to become a photographer is to go shoot up there. Yeah. So I can only imagine actually being a photographer and having the opportunity to do it. Has to be just jaw dropping.
It is, man. I love adventures, and I met so many great people on my trip because I just took a bus and I stayed in a hostel, and so I met like I made some good friends from Ireland, Northern Ireland, and they invited me to stay with them anytime, so I can go to Northern Ireland. I make plans, and I love to travel and kind of discover new just new things, but I agree, Toronto is a beautiful city too. So, and that's what I just get excited about, just discovering new aspects of life, and that's why photography and just has captured my heart, I guess, as an artist. It's because I can move around and capture this with this tool and make a living off it, and tell unique stories by going out and discovering and meeting people, and just showing light on things many people don't get to experience because of the grind of life, maybe family, work, etc. I have the advantage of being able to kind of be flexible and move, and kind of like a sage of
That's very exciting, and there's a couple there's so much more I would love to sit down and chat with you about that I feel like we didn't touch on, and I think we'll have to find another time to sit down and chat and have you on another episode, because we barely touched on the slam poetry. We kind of dove deep into technology and photography. But you sound like you are a true, just an artist creator, and I love that mentality. I think that's the mentality that all artists and creators should have, no matter what they do, even if they primarily associate themselves with one thing. I think using the broader term makes you a better creator, because you're willing to take more risks and stuff, and that's great. I love that. So before we let you go officially, let people know where they can find you, your work, and anything that you might have coming up. In the month of May, we'll say is probably when would be the most applicable. There we go. I can talk. Dates for you to plug.
Cool. Anybody can check out some photo work at rlundberg.com. Also on Instagram, it's at r_Lundberg, LUNDBERG. Or I just created a new Insta account, capturing just solely on my music work, in photographic work, at Uncontaminated Sound. So it's a new series of giving insight into the indie scene in New York and beyond, capturing these intimate moments of pure expression, and trying to capture these artists' expression on stage. Besides that, in May, I don't have anything coming up at this moment to plug, but generally things just come up, so I'll definitely post later.
And we'll be sure to as we get closer to when we're posting the episode, anything that's needs to be plugged will be in the show notes. All those plugs that you just heard Robert give will be in our show notes, and anything else I will check with him and Melissa to make sure that there's not anything else that needs to be included. Cool. Just so that people can come check out whatever it is you may be doing, if the opportunity arises.
Yeah, I would love to talk maybe on another episode regarding poetry, because I would have some poems prepared, So.
Oh yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Again, we kind of went on a tangent that I was expecting to talk more about the poetry, but we went on tangents that I did not expect. And
well, I actually came in thinking we were talking about more regarding photography, my photographic work. So.
Okay. Well, there you go. So that's you. So you geared the conversation exactly the way that you wanted it to go, and that's okay. It was all about you today. So, Robert, thank you for being on the show, and I would absolutely love to have you on again to sit down and chat about poetry and maybe some Boston versus Philly sports.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, man.
All right, thank you, Robert, for being part of the show, being a guest on the show. Great conversation, and this is a perfect example of a conversation where I thought it was going to be dominated by the slam poetry portion of his life, because that just seemed like such a unique part of his story that I thought we'd be focusing on that. But conversations take you down different paths. You never know when you're going off the cuff. You never know where they're going to take you. So we'll have to have Robert back on down the road here so we can talk some sound poetry, because I not my world. I'm not. I know very little about poetry, as I probably put on display during the interview / conversation. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to this show. And I, yes, 100% am stealing this bit from Brian Durkin on Full Belly Laughs, but he has a good point. And every podcaster should be taking a couple minutes out of their podcast to thank you, the listener, for listening to us. You literally could be doing anything else over the last hour or so that this show was on, and you chose to spend it with us, with Everything Is Awesome. You chose to listen to me chat with Robert, or go on my pre-intro or post-intro nonsense. So the fact that you take your time out of the day to listen to Everything Is Awesome means the world to me, and hopefully the payback is that you're enjoying each and every episode that we put out here on awesomepodcast.com. So thank you. Literally, this show is nothing without the listeners. So make sure you pat yourself on the back for that. And if you want to support this show in other ways, you can also support us on patreon.com/thatentertains, where you'll get early access to Everything Is Awesome and every other show on the That's Entertainment podcast network. And as we start rolling out more features on That's Entertainment, you'll get early access to that. Patreon is kind of like an ongoing Kickstarter. I like to call it and describe it as a subscription service. You're subscribing to That's Entertainment, and that's a suite of services and content that you get delivered to you early in some fashion, whether it be written, audio, or video, depending on the pledge level that you pledge at. Or subscribe at, I should say. So that would be a great way to support this show. $1 a month is less than a cup of coffee. And while that may, you may not notice that dollar missing from your bank account, we'll notice those add up. And, my goal now, after 10 years of podcasting, is to very simply break even. Is very simply to have my hosting fees covered, and that would be a huge goal of mine if we could make that happen. Many thanks to you if you do subscribe to our Patreon on patreon.com/entertains. And I understand, money's tight. It's hard. It's hard to, choose which content creators you're going to support. It's hard to choose whether you're going to save up for the next big thing, or, subscribe to a dopey podcast and pay money for it. So I understand that, and you can help and support the show in other ways by leaving a 5-star review for Everything Is Awesome on iTunes. And that Apple math helps us get in front of more ears, and the more ears listening to us means the bigger and cooler things that we can actually do. And, of course, word of mouth recommendations is a huge, huge help, because you know what? A review is just words written down. But you telling someone to listen to the show, you putting the show on, and while someone else is in the car with you, it means something more coming from a friend, perhaps. So thank you for all the support that you give this show. Thanks for listening. We'll be here on awesomepodcast.com, and we are part of the Core Temp Arts Podcast Network at coretemparts.com. And guess what? I haven't been awesome. You haven't been awesome. We've been awesome!
Thank you for listening to the Core Temp Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Core Temp Arts shows, visit coretemparts.com.